Hello, it's Anthony Chadwick from the Webinar Vet, welcoming you to another of our podcast episodes, VETchat. Very fortunate today to have Sarah Machell on the line. Sarah is a veterinary surgeon and works for Vetster, which is one of the telemedicine platforms originating in Canada, but now working also in the UK. And Sarah, perhaps welcome first to the podcast, but perhaps tell us a little bit about your history and your background before we start asking more about telemedicine and Vetster and so on.
Well, thank you very much for having me here today, Anthony. I'm thrilled to be here and love to talk about virtual care and telemedicine. It's a passion of mine. So, as you referenced in my introduction, I am a veterinarian. I went to school here at the University of Guelph in Ontario, Canada, and graduated some time ago. As a small animal practitioner, I owned a small animal practice just outside of Toronto for almost 20 years. And I've always been particularly interested in tech in addition to veterinary medicine. I grew up with a father who worked for IBM, so technology was a part of my DNA growing up. And when I transitioned out of practice ownership in 2018, I had sort of a few years prior to that really started getting intrigued with the telemedicine and the delivery of veterinary care via virtual means, and then transitioned my practice into a corporate network in 2018 and started to explore the space a little bit more. And then in 2020, I was approached by the founders of Vetster and kind of got interested in what they were doing, and I joined the Vetster team in mid 2020 as the platform and the software was being developed and the business plan was kind of rolling out. So I've been a part of the organization basically from the beginning, and I'm really passionate, as I've already mentioned, about virtual care, and play a pretty important role in the software program and what we're doing internally. So.
Sarah, that's great. And obviously you come from a lovely part of the world. Guelph, I've been to. It's a super vet school, but it's a lovely area, that part of Ontario as well, isn't it?
I'm pretty partial to it. Live in a nice rural property. We have some chickens and ducks and a bunch of dogs and cats, as I'm sure people can understand. And my son actually is attending the University of Guelph now too. So I'm pretty partial to this part of the world for sure. Although I'm excited to come to the UK soon.
It's interesting because I think your story is a little bit like mine. I was a vet in practice, developed Webinar Vet, which is obviously very technical. Doing that because I had an interest in all of the sort of internet and so on. And my dad didn't work for IBM, but nevertheless, it was something that I saw the potential for, and I think that's become more and more apparent, hasn't it, over the last few years, particularly with the pandemic, how much technology helped us personally, but also from a business sense over that whole period.
Absolutely. And I think, if I'm asked the direct question, why are you doing this, Sarah? Why are you involved with a telemedicine platform? I'm pretty quick to raise sort of my two pillars of what bring me to work, what make me want to be a part of this. And I think both of these sort of areas that are drive me to be a part of things. Were issues with our profession and our ability to meet patients prior to the pandemic. But certainly the pandemic forced us all to really come to terms with virtual everything, and really pushed the opportunity for advancing virtual care in the veterinary field, really front and foremost. And so the two areas that I'm particularly passionate about, that I see the opportunity for the veterinary profession to really have capitalize on when it comes to administering virtual care. First and foremost, the for our veterinary professionals, balancing that, precarious, ever challenging work life balance, becoming a virtual care practitioner, and adding that to the variety of career paths for veterinarians is really exciting for me. It's a little bit less labor intensive, and I think that there's many folks within the industry who could use a different avenue to continue to practice, and I'm really excited about that opportunity for us as veterinarians. And then, of course, I think that there's a real role and a real piece in supporting the access to qualified veterinary care that virtual care or telemedicine brings to our profession, because there is such a demand, overwhelming demand for veterinary care. And I know that's the case not just in North America, but also in the UK, and truthfully globally. And so the access to care piece is another part that I'm really committed to and feel very passionate about.
It's definitely been exacerbated not only by the pandemic but also Brexit in the UK, where we separated from the EU, which meant that the number of vets dropped. And of course, the pandemic, a lot of people took on pets. So I know it's been very busy. And I think it's really important, if I may say, that you, as medical director of Vetster, have a very long history of being a practicing vet, which not only adds credibility but gives you that experience of, you've seen so much, haven't you, that helps in how Vetster maybe develops. So perhaps tell us a little bit about Vetster and how that got started. So some of the backstory from Vetster.
Great question. Our two co-founders come from a technology background, not a veterinary medicine background, and their business idea and concept actually came to fruition in late 2019, and in early to mid 2020, pre-pandemic, they had actually begun developing the software technology. And then, as I previously mentioned, I met the two co-founders and joined the team in mid 2020, and have really helped to sort of bring the veterinary industry perspective into the technology part. And so we find ourselves now, just over 2 years into market, where we've been actively accepting and completing appointments on the platform here in North America. And we definitely feel that we're the fastest veterinary telehealth platform, connecting licensed veterinarians with pet owners via video, voice, and online chat enabled functionality. Um, and so I think one of the most unique things about our platform is that we're currently the only major platform that are really empowering veterinarians to join our platform and provide virtual care, and utilize our software and technology to really grow and develop their own virtual practices. And so it's a really unique perspective in the telemedicine space, in contrast to a lot of the other, operations that are offering virtual care.
Fantastic. And what made you bring the platform to the UK? Because I know there's already some vets that are using Vetster in the UK for probably the last 6 to 12 months. So tell us a little bit about that story as well.
Well, we're really excited about the response that we've received from both pet owners and the veterinary community here in North America. It's been a very rewarding place to be in. So very positive response from pet owners who are accessing the care, and additionally from veterinarians who are reaching out, who are joining the platform and are really seeing success on the platform. And it was this success in North America that really made us want to share the opportunity across the pond in the UK, and eventually, fairly shortly, we have the intent of expanding more globally as well. Mostly driven by the positive feedback from both the veterinary community and the pet owning community. And I say pet owning, but I would also love to mention that our veterinarians on our platform at this point in time, we've treated over 20 different species virtually. So it's not just a small animal sort of driven platform. We've seen everything from our traditional companion animal species, but into the exotics, and even we have some equine and even sheep and cattle patients as well that have been treated.
Fantastic. Explain to me perhaps how telemedicine is in North America. It's obviously an area that is developing in the UK, and obviously also the regulation around telemedicine in the UK. How does it work with physical practices and the virtual practices? How do we bring those together so that they support and benefit each other?
I think that's another really fabulous question. And certainly in North America, just as I understand in the UK, um, it's the regulatory piece is actively evolving. What we see in North America, unfortunately, is a very fragmented process and system. Certainly in the United States and in Canada, each state and province, so 50 states, 9, 10 provinces here in Canada, have their own independent regulatory bodies governing the delivery of virtual care along with veterinary care in general. And we see quite a spectrum of adoption, and willingness to sort of extend the opportunity to its full potential. For example, here in Ontario, where I'm licensed and I practice, we've actually got a very progressive regulatory body here that have been really, quite frankly, in North America and probably globally, leading the way when it comes to evolving veterinary regulations to be able to support the legal, ethical, practice of virtual care and telemedicine. And how do we marry virtual care and the traditional bricks and mortar practice? I think that one thing that we advocate, I talk a lot about when I'm talking about what Vetster is doing, is we are not interested in being a replacement for a bricks and mortar practice. We are looking to complement and support bricks and mortar, and I think that marrying between the in-person care and the virtual care for pet owners ultimately is what I see the future of the savvy pet owner looking for as well. And so I think we have a lot of work to do in our profession to build the regulations to enable and support the practice of telemedicine. I think that it's a slow process. It always is. And I think we have a lot to learn. But I think what we can also talk about and share is that in the last 2 years, certainly here in Canada and in Ontario specifically, with the with the adoption of virtual care, there's been very low to no complaints or concerns raised to the regulatory bodies in terms of care that's been given virtually. And so how do we get this, comfort level and this knowledge that, virtual care practitioners are doing a really great job and helping, broadly spread, I think is important. And certainly I know in the UK there is, a lot of uh, the regulations talk about the physical availability of a veterinarian when it comes to the potential of prescribing through virtual care. And I think that's an area that, if I understand correctly, there is a lot of sort of time being devoted to and conversation to look at those regulations and how we modernize them.
Hmm. And I think what telemedicine does for me, in a sense, Sarah, we've had this forever because, of course, we would jump on the phone and give advice over the phone. But that was always a little bit lacking because, of course, you couldn't see the dog. On the whole, we didn't tend to charge for that because it was seen as part of a service. Whereas actually, sometimes by triaging, that may save the client having to come in anyway. We just get more information once you add video and you can see the patient and can talk to the client face to face, don't you?
Exactly, and it's one of the points I frequently like to raise when I'm speaking to colleagues at events, when we're talking about telemedicine and virtual care. you know, a lot of folks are trepidatious about it and have concerns about how it can possibly be done. And I frequently like to remind members of an audience that might be listening to me that for those of us who've had a telephone in our practice and an email connection, we have been providing virtual care for decades. We just didn't call it this, or we didn't call it telemedicine.
Hmm.
And I think that's an interesting light bulb moment a lot of the time. And I think platforms like Vetster, or ways in which we can incorporate monetizing the advice that we give and the virtual care that we're providing are really important for the long-term health of our profession as well.
Definitely. And I think also a couple of points. We've obviously got a lot of people in the profession who perhaps aren't practicing because of family commitments or whatever. And this, I think, could very easily fit in, and I'm sure it already is doing, please tell, for somebody to do a couple of days a week, which keeps them in the swing of things where they can be doing this from home rather than in a practice. And that can take some pressure off the people in the practice who are working. I know at the moment, certainly in the UK, and I'm sure it's the same in Canada and America, working very hard, seeing all the patients that are coming in, but potentially with maybe not the right number of vets actually in the practice because recruitment is probably the big issue of the time, isn't it? That practices, a lot of practices are understaffed.
Absolutely, Anthony. And I think in my opinion, you just hit the nail on the head. And as I referenced earlier, one of the two big reasons why I find myself in this space and advocating and educating folks about the opportunity is this chance for veterinary practitioners to stay in the field, to continue to be able to practice, albeit in a different modality, but versus the alternative of leaving the profession altogether. And this ability of a virtual care practitioner to support their practice, even though they're not physically able to be there, is a massive unlock for everyone in this community.
Definitely. I think the other point is, we've just, I'm saying coming through, we don't know what the next autumn, winter will hold, but hopefully, please God, we're through the worst of the pandemic. But obviously, some of these, whether these pandemics will become more common because of global warming, closeness to wild animals, which potentially was the cause of COVID-19. This actually future proofs us for potentially future times where it may be difficult to get hold of vets for whatever reason. We were very much in the infancy at the beginning of 2020. We've learned a lot over the last 2 years. So please God, there isn't another one. But if there is, we'll be much more prepared for these sort of events. And of course, as you've said, if you're in a rural area and there isn't much veterinary care in that area, it acts as a service within those more isolated communities as well, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And I think, you've raised another key point that I think it's very important as a community and as a profession that we don't lose the opportunity and the learnings that we've had the chance to acquire during the pandemic, and just push virtual care and telemedicine aside thinking, oh, we're over that and we don't need it anymore. Now is the time for us to really lean in and action what we've learned and the good that has become of this opportunity thanks to the pandemic. And hopefully, as you've said, we don't we aren't faced imminently with anything else, but we would be foolish not to carry on the path, and continue to expand this space because it's only doing good.
Sarah, we were talking at the beginning about where you're from. I know the area quite well because I've got family in Ontario. But you're coming to the Big Smoke. You're coming to London next month with the Vetster team for London Vet Show. Tell us a little bit about that. Presumably you've got a stand at the show, and perhaps for people listening on the podcast who are in the UK area who are going to London Vet Show, there's maybe an opportunity to actually see how this platform works and how it could work for people who maybe are at London Vet Show and want to come over and have a chat with you.
Absolutely, Anthony. Thank you for inviting this conversation. I personally and the entire Vetster team are so incredibly excited to come and visit, the at the London Vet Show. We're thrilled to be able to meet with veterinarians and practice owners and decision makers, and to share our experience. So as I referenced earlier, the overwhelmingly positive feedback has just been so uplifting, and really, for me personally, has given me such wind behind my sails to take this over the pond. We are going to be at the vet show, as you referenced, and we do have a booth, which we're super excited about as well. We'll be at booth number P15, and we'll have our team there. Eager, as long as the time change doesn't affect us too much, eager and excited to be meeting with veterinarians and absolutely, giving demos, talking about our opportunity. I also I'm giving a presentation, a talk on Friday morning, talking about our experience in North America, and about the opportunities that we see, that I see for virtual care, in the next 2 to 5 years as well. So I'd love to host anyone who's interested to come and listen to me speak. I love to talk, so I'm excited about that. And of course, we're going to have the traditional goodies to entice you to come and visit us, with a draw and a prize and all those sort of things at our booth.
Well, it's always good to have somebody who likes to chat to me. I've been really honoured that you've taken time to come onto the podcast. I think it is a really interesting area. One of our value words at Webinar Vet is innovation. We cannot stand still as a profession. We are, I think, potentially still quite conservative with a small c, but actually change happens, and we either decide to be a part of change or we let be the one that molds us. So I think it's really important that we're having these conversations, that we can see what's happening in the future, and to embrace that, because change, I think, can be worrying, but the one certainty in life is that change comes, and change is happening very quick with technology. So we I think have an obligation as vets, not only for our own professional lives but also to the patients, that we look at how tech can help us to do our jobs even better.
Absolutely. And, I think one of the things that I haven't necessarily spoken to yet at this point, but that I see and I believe, and we've done a lot of user research on, from our platform perspective, is that the truth of the matter is that the pet owning public are going to demand this type of access to care. As
Yes.
we look at the changing demographic of the pet owner, they are virtual and digitally nascent, and everything is digital first. And so if we don't take this opportunity to meet them where they want to be, we're going to lose the opportunity.
Mm. We ignore the opportunity at our peril, don't we?
I firmly believe that.
Sarah, it's been fantastic speaking to you. I'm really looking forward to meeting you at London Vet Show. People listening to this after London Vet Show, you've missed them, but I'm sure there'll be an opportunity to chat to Vetster, um, perhaps you can give us a contact email that we could have if there are people listening to the podcast who want to follow up the conversation with you, Sarah.
Absolutely. If you're not able to make it to the London Vet Show, or you're catching this podcast afterwards, we do have tons of information available right on our website, right on the platform. It's Vetster, VETster.com. You will find that we have a very robust live chat support available where you can speak to one of our agents, asking questions, who can then put you directly in touch with our veterinary support team, which includes myself and Jennifer Steele, who will also be at the show. And our email addresses, if you just wanted to reach out via email instead, are super simple as well. So it's Jennifer with two N's at vetster.com, or Sarah with an H, Sarah, at vetster.com.
Sarah, thanks once again. It's a really fascinating, fast-moving area. I'm sure we will have much more to speak about when we're at London Vet Show together. I'm looking forward to meeting you, and thank you so much for giving us your time today.
Likewise.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. I'm Anthony Chadwick from the Webinar Vets. See you on a podcast very soon. Bye-bye.